Welcome everybody back to the Multi-Location Marketing Show. I am Elliot Olson, and I am here with our regular host, Matt Nickols, our other regular host, CEO of MarketSnare, Matt Nickols. And today we've got a special guest, Kevin Mullett. He is our VP of Program Services here at MarketSnare, and he's in charge of all of our social and a bunch of other things. But the reason I mention that is because today we are actually talking about local social media. And for those of you who are just joining us, to give some context, this show is obviously in the title. It's all about multi-location local marketing. And so today we are talking about local social media as it applies to multi-location companies. And so we're really excited to have Kevin here on the show with us today. And I think you guys are going to get a lot of value out of this one. So anything else you guys want to add before we start asking, before I have some questions I want to ask you guys?
Well,
I guess I did want to mention, I forgot to mention Kevin is a speaker on the digital marketing circuit. So he's been around for, I don't know, how long have you been in marketing for now, Kevin?
Very, very long time. To say how long would divulge my age.
Yeah.
Well, he's been with MarketSnare for well over a decade. I know that. So
it's been 18 years with
oh my gosh, almost 2 decades. So.
Cool.
Crazy.
Dang. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. You guys I'm definitely a little bit more fresh than you guys, I would say, in terms of my tenure at MarketSnare. But anyway, wanted to start off just asking, just kind of laying some groundwork. What is local social media management, and why is it important when it comes to multi-location businesses? And I thought, Kevin, you could take this first question.
Well, I think the thing that people should understand first and foremost is the concepts of social media have been around since before it was so coined. So, it was in the 2000s when the whole social media thing came about, and it was coined as social media. But the premises goes back to, bulletin boards and other types of groups that we had, and even, offline mechanisms. So it's a way to connect with people that are in a community or a group or in a setting or using a particular app or using a particular service. And the thing that we're referring to today is, well, how are you going to do that at scale? So here's a perfect example for that. A long, long time ago, when there used to be newspapers all across the country, and there used to be even local community magazines and or newspapers, you would see these ads that always appeared at the back of them, and they would try and sell you something. Well, that same ad would appear across thousands of newspapers all across the country, okay? And it was a way for that advertiser to try and reach people in multiple locations everywhere. And they had to do that manually, right? And so what we're talking today is well, if you have thousands of locations where you want to speak to an audience and you could get business from that market, how do you do that efficiently so you're not writing out a check, creating an envelope, putting a stamp on it, and sending it in to put your ad in? How do you do that at scale? And the metaphor is speaking of paid, but it works the same way with organic. How do you do that in a scaled manner so that you have efficiencies, so that you have less legal exposure, and a whole bunch of things that we'll talk about here through this podcast today?
That's awesome. Yeah, anything to add to that? Why it's important? Why local social media management is important?
Well, yeah, I think as Kevin said, the brands obviously are using social media. I mean, anyone is trying to take advantage of that, and they have been for years because it's very powerful. And obviously, with the digital platforms we have today, you can really get granular on the audience you're targeting and things like that from an ad perspective, which is a great way to use social media, but also, as Kevin said, organically, building your brand And there's just a big difference between what you do with social media on a national level in building brand, and I think the purpose at the local level. So there is obviously some overlap. You still want to support your brand. You want to build awareness. You want to be connected to your community. But what we're seeing is a lot of consumers at the local level, we call it kind of the last mile of the sale. And generally people are researching at a national level when they're trying to familiarize themselves with the brand, or they love a brand. They're trying to research, products and services that they're interested in. But at the local level, it tends to be a little bit more transactional. Like, I'm getting down close to the people that are here that are actually I might be working with or might be delivering the service. And I think in general, with local marketing, there seems to be a lot more inherent trust, because you're operating on the assumption that these people are in my local community. These things are relevant to me. There may be national promotions and things, but generally at the local level, inventory is different, promotions different, maybe design styles, how they talk about a product, what the needs are. I mean, if you live in Colorado, in the mountains, you might have different needs with products and services than if you live in Miami, Florida, for example. Certainly your imagery is different. The culture is different. How you're talking about things are different. So consumers are really good about sniffing that out if you're just kind of have a one size fits all message. So really what we found is that if you are much more local in your focus, right, you tend to get much better results. And that brings me to a point. There was a study actually done by Facebook of 800 multi-unit brands, or multi-location brands as we call them. And they found that local pages outperform the corporate pages in their social media by over 346%. So it just goes to show that, people engage. I mean, if you're engaging with something that you see, there's millions of followers and, you just feel like you're kind of receiving messaging. But at the local level, it tends to be more interactive because you're feeling like, hey, this is, the Indianapolis or the Dallas or the Denver, branch of this. And you kind of expect a little bit more maybe communication, a little bit more specific information about what's available in your market. And so that tends to be much more trusted. And that's why we see it performing really well. And you get a lot more engagement at that local level. So it's definitely worth it. The challenge comes in when it's a lot different approach, right, than national. So what we always try to do and recommend to clients is how do you use your national assets, the great photography and content and well thought out strategies and things at the national level, and apply them to local, while having local people involved to some degree is obviously great. But every company is different in what their network's like and how they can use social media, what social media channels are right for them. And so there's a lot of variance, but really, if you can figure out how to make that work, and that's what we're going to talk about, some tactics and strategies and things that we've seen work, and some of the tech that can support that, you really need to put a plan in place. And if social media is something that really fits for you, then it really makes a lot of sense to dive in and to get creative and to think through some of the strategies. How can we take advantage of these things, build efficiencies, economies of scale, so that we can do this and we can localize it? How can we get people involved in a controlled way where we still have, some ability to protect the brand, protect any kind of legal compliance related issues? So those are some of the challenges that people think about when they want to go more local, and they think immediately, and rightfully so, like, oh my gosh, that's just a ton of work. I've got 100 local markets that we're in. So yeah, it can be daunting. So that's kind of the conundrum that a lot of marketers find themselves in, is they've got, they see the value, they see the need, but then they see the tremendous amount of work in doing that and making it work, and some of the compliance related things. And they're like, and a lot of times people just don't do anything. Right. And so, right.
and Matt, if you think about it, we've had clients before that say, wow, we've got Bob, and man, Bob's location is killing it on social media. The problem is we don't have 100 Bobs, right? So you have Bob and you have Ralph and you have Sally and you have, whoever. And in their markets, they're killing it on social media because they're outgoing people, because they are accustomed to it, because they use it in their personal life. And the real issue is you don't have those 3 people in all 100 locations. You only have that level of competency and that level of personality in those given markets. So the question is how can you take 80 to 90% of what they're doing that works? You can't always duplicate the exact personality. You can't duplicate in all instances, though we have some tactics for doing so, that the sports team won that day or something like that. But you can take a very large percentage of what works for Bob and Sally and deploy that across a lot of locations. You just need some efficiencies and some tech to make that happen, because so far we're not allowed to clone Bob and Sally. So how do you do that at scale?
Yep, exactly. And the upside,
right. Before we get too far into this, because I think some of these questions we're going to answer as we get further down, I did want to ask, what differentiates local social media from national? A corporate social media effort versus a local social media effort. I want to just ask you guys that, and then we can get into some of the upsides of like doing it the right way and some of the other tactics and efficiencies you guys are kind of getting into. So question is, what differentiates local social media from national, versus national corporate strategy versus the local social media strategy or social media efforts?
In short, content and personality. So, that's the briefest version of it. Now, there's a whole lot that goes behind that. But essentially, Matt touched on it a little bit earlier, where your content may change because your inventory or your service or the product offering may change. And national is saying, we do this. And you're like, well, we actually just do this, because that's what our market is. We don't do this because we're not in Alaska, or we're not in Miami, right? So having that content reflect the photography and the reality of the services that you provide in that market definitely differentiates from national. The other option is another thing that Matt alluded to, which is the personality or the engagement or the community building. Social media people and marketing people in general love to use all these fancy terms or whatever, but it's basically about connecting, like Matt said, connecting with who you're going to do business with. And that's definitely different than, I'm not contacting the manufacturer. I understand that the manufactured product is on the table. It's on consideration, right? Or in consideration. That's fine. These 3 manufacturers are in consideration. Who am I going to buy it from? That's totally different from what I'm going to buy, who I'm going to buy it from. And that's where a lot of community and personality and, oh, Bob, man, Bob always talks about our local sports team, and I dig that. Or Bob's giving us the local weather and telling us to watch and be careful when we drive today. Or it's locality, it's affinity for that market, it's affinity for that particular place. And if you think about it again, I love to talk about things in terms of that this is not necessarily new. It's a new channel, it's new mechanisms, but we've been doing business this way from the dawn of time, since business has been done.
Yeah, and I would say at the local level, it tends to be, a lot closer to the sale, right? Lower in the funnel, more conversionary. And I also think, it just widely depends so much on your market, what you're selling. If you're selling boats, you want to be connected to people that love boats and showing all the cool new things. And, if you sell custom truck parts, you want to show people in that local community and the different, mods that they've done and pictures of it. So you're kind of building that affinity with the group, but then you're also, when you're providing that good content that your community likes, then you can slip in, hey, we've got this new release, check this out, or a sale or a promotion, so there's a lot of different tactics. I mean, if you're a dental office, maybe it's more about public health and reminders of getting cleaning and what it can do. And maybe you're talking about different cosmetic type things and having a great smile, right? And so you're connecting and you're trying to build credibility and referrals and things like that. So every market is totally different in what you're trying to do. Now, obviously, there's always the biggest difference. National is totally about the brand and what you're doing in education, and you can build somewhat of a community. But then when you take it down from the whole country down to one market, now it just is a different feel, right? And it's connecting with those people, and you're trying to do it in context of that local community, and that's where the localization comes in. So.
Yeah, Matt. So to jump off of that, to give I love the boat example. So let's say that you're coastal. So you have a manufacturer that creates boats, okay? Let's say fishing boats, right? Well, that fishing boat manufacturer has both freshwater and saltwater versions of that, right? So the national is all about all of their boats, and then they'll highlight specific ones. But you're in a coastal area, and your coastal area has no freshwater lakes. What is the content on your page going to refer to? Right? You're going to talk about the saltwater versions of that, because if you inject, and this is the critical part that people need to think about, is if you constantly are injecting things that are of no relevance to them on your social media channels, then they're less likely to participate, watch, follow, engage, etc. So the coastal account, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Clubhouse, it doesn't matter what it is. All of that content is going to be built around, this is our audience. They're generally ranging in this, they look like this, they're these type of people, they talk like this, and this is the product that they're mostly interested in. Right? And so that completely changes how the content would be portrayed and used on.
And don't you think customers, I mean, I know personally myself, and I think what we see in the data is customers are a lot more likely to engage at, if I'm in Miami, like we talked about, talking to a local dealer about specific needs or questions, or, than they would a national, just because, it's like, calling into a radio show. If you're on XM radio and there's a million listeners, there's a snowball's chance in hell you're going to get through. You might not call, but if it's a local guy that 75% of the time you get on and you can talk, then maybe you're going to call in. So I mean, it's the same kind of thing, right? You expect maybe more response. You expect more specific, actionable information that you're looking for, or getting a question answered and things like that. I think at the local level, you're going to get that. And so there's another study by Mainstay Solaire that basically said in their research that local pages received 5 times the marketing reach and 8 times the engagement. And so that's what we're seeing. And, that's really the upside, why you want to do it, why you want to think about it. That doesn't mean national is not every bit as important as it is still, but now it's a different purpose. It's a different level. And figuring it out, can provide a ton of upside for you, just depending on what market you're in. If social media is a good way to connect, and we don't say that it's the tactics can be wildly different depending on what you do. But you can even start out basic, and I think we're going to talk about some of those tactics and tools. But really, one of the things I wanted to talk about as well was just what are your options, right? So if you say, yeah, I know there's upside here, like I said, it can be overwhelming. You really have, as I see it, kind of 4 options. One, just don't do it, right? Just rely on the national. Don't do anything at the local level. And there's obviously problems with that, right? Because one, you're leaving an opportunity on the table, and What we've seen with some of our clients is they just decide, hey, we're just going to do national, and then they start getting people. And Facebook used to do this. I don't think they're still doing it, but like they would literally, if people were like going somewhere and checking in, they would just create a page for you, and then they'd have all these orphan pages out there that they had no control over. People might be posting a question or whatever. No one's there to answer. It's like, no one's there to answer it or to respond. And so, from that perspective, social media has almost become like, having a phone number or a mailing address. You have to have it. It's just like a certain baseline of doing business because people are going to look there. And if you're not there, you're missing out on opportunities. It's just like not answering your phone when someone's calling. So not doing it is not a good option. Some people do that just because they don't know. But then things, are generally happening anyway, right? And you're just not there to answer the bell. I mean, anything you want to add to that, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I used to say a lot at conferences is, everybody imagine that you have multiple phone lines and you get calls on all of those phone lines. And we're accustomed to that in business, right? That you have multiple phone lines. Well, decide today that you're not going to answer one. Why would you do that? Why would you choose to not answer the phone on one particular line? You wouldn't do that. Well, social media is much the same. Now, that could be taken too far. You don't, like Matt and I argue about this all the time, jokingly, but somewhat seriously, does every business on the planet have to have a Twitter account? Probably not. But if that's a phone that's ringing and you're not answering it, or you didn't create a mechanism because people want to communicate with you there, then that's lost opportunity, and your competition may be doing it. Don't be blind to that. So we go through a whole thing with our clients of, do you need to be here, and what's the benefit and what's the cost? And obviously we're not going to get into all of that here, but the point is you have to be logical about where you're participating, and if the phone is ringing, answer the daggum thing, because oftentimes there's business on the end.
Let me play the devil's advocate though, Kevin, because I'm sure there's some people that are like, I mean, obviously you've got national managers of social media that are probably listening to this, and VPs of marketing, whatever. But a franchisee is going to say, well, a phone call potentially is a lot different than somebody just liking a post or somebody commenting on a page. Why do I need to put effort into that like I would if somebody was ringing the call, as somebody was calling me?
So what this almost always boils down to is one of two things. The belief in the value. They either believe or they don't believe the value is there. I'm not in the conversion game. I'm not going to try and convince people to take opportunity. I'm in the helping people who are ready to take advantage of that opportunity game. Okay. So once you're convinced that you need it, I'll help you. I'm not going to try and convince you. And the second part is the dauntingness of their current job and all of the things that they have to do. They don't understand that there are methods to make it so that they can do it. If every time that you were on the phone, you got stuck on the phone for an hour and you couldn't get your other work done, you would stop doing it. That's the objection. The objection is, will it bring me value? Do I believe that? Can I do it? And can I do it within the budget and time and blah, blah, blah? That's the
exactly.
argument.
And if you have a strategy
that makes a lot of sense,
taking you a ton of time and effort to do it and you're not getting any return, then people are like, eh. But if you could do it and it didn't take any extra effort, then why not? Now, obviously, some businesses are a lot more focused on, they're more, Twitter is a good fit for them. But a lot of businesses, Twitter, especially at the local level, might not be a good fit. So maybe they just do Twitter at the national level. They don't do it locally. So they feel like they have their bases covered. But Facebook, yeah, and Instagram, yeah, that's a great fit. And so I want to spend our time there. So you got to take every situation and look at it and the pros and the cons and where's your audience and how are they communicating? What are your competitors doing? So those are the things that you kind of evaluate, and you can kind of gauge what kind of opportunity is there. what kind of conversations are going on the different channels and where the best places for you to play are. And I think, that's an evaluation every business has to make. And it's not a one size fits all. But the thing is, with some of the strategies and tactics that we're going to talk about, once you're doing content and you're localizing it and you're doing all the things that we've said kind of produce as a result, there's a lot of economies of scale. So adding another channel and doing it, you could do that, at least have a presence on there, but maybe you don't focus and do all this unique content specifically for Twitter, for example. So, it really is an evaluation, on kind of a business by business basis, but you want to consider all of those options. And then, at what point does it make sense to invest in being on a certain platform? So.
Yeah, Elliot, one other point that I'd like to make is, a lot of people say they try social media. Okay. They get on, they try, they make a haphazard, that's not a dig. I mean, they just literally don't have the time to figure it out. And it doesn't immediately provide results. And how often have we seen this where people jump ship on things that don't immediately provide results? And then they bounce. They say, this doesn't work. I don't know what all of these people are talking about. But the reality of it is you don't try social media. Social media works. There are ample examples of that working all day long, right, for businesses. One of my good friends who's also on the speaking circuit, he was very active in Google Plus. And jokes aside, everybody was making fun of Google Plus and how it was worthless and it was a waste of time and Google was going to shut it down. And he decided that he was going to go all in on Google Plus and make it work. And he figured it out. And he ended up getting jobs out of that. He ended up getting business out of it. He ended up getting a career advancement out of it. And meanwhile, all of these people over here are saying that Google Plus doesn't work, and he's over here killing it, right? So the point is that all of these platforms could work for an individual business. It's whether that is going to take a lot of strategy, a lot of effort, or whether there are other low-hanging fruit. But you don't try social media. We've already established that social media works. Now what we need to get on with is how do we have it work for you, and how do we have it work for you at scale? The proof is already done.
And that's great.
So we've kind of touched on not doing it at all, and we've kind of touched on letting the local people handle it. So if you're a manager,
I think we need to talk a little bit more about that one. So because that is probably the most common strategy, unfortunately, is, maybe not doing it all is pretty common. But then if they are going to do it, what we found in our experience is a lot of businesses are just leaving it up to the local people and just kind of go do it if you want to do it, right, at the local level. And so, wow, that creates all kinds of issues. Now, as Kevin was saying earlier, it's kind of that, you've heard of the 80-20 rule. I really call it the 99-1 rule, or at least the 95-5, because you're not going to have – you might have 5% of your people that have that personality, that natural ability to do marketing, to use the technology, to use it effectively, that want to dive in, that want to do it. And they do great with it, because – they're engaging, they understand, what good content is, what their audience is looking for, and they're just out there naturally doing it. And there's so many small businesses that do a great job, and typically I say it's the entrepreneur who has, it's like a sink or swim. I've got to do this. It's part of my business, and they just dive in and do it and they learn it. But a lot of times with like franchises or dealers, they've got so many other things going on that they kind of rely on, and that's probably why they bought a franchise, because they're relying on the national organization to do the marketing support for them. And so they don't have the time, they don't have the expertise, it's a lot to dive in and to really learn that. And, if you don't have that motivation or the background, or like, I've got to do this, or it's sink or swim, then a lot of times you just don't have the motivation, to do it and to do a great job. So letting the local people just handle it, you're going to get a total mixed bag, and the majority of it is not going to be good. It's not going to be, some people, it's just, the majority of people, I would say, it's like torture to them to have to, I've got to do a post. What am I going to say? Blah, blah, blah.
It's a task.
Matt, I'm thinking in my head right now, just for some example of context, some people probably laugh at this, but like, I'm just thinking of my friend who's a massage therapist who's 25 and books out everything, all of her stuff through social media, like that's how she books out her clients on Instagram. But then you've got the HVAC service person who's, no offense, but they're a little later in their life. They didn't grow up in a generation that uses that stuff. And we're expecting them as, managers of their program and, their support team to have them actually do social media in a way that's meaningful and relevant to their local market. Yep. Like it just a lot of times is like a big expectation to put on someone who, not to say they can't do it or that some don't do it well, but it's just completely two separate examples of like how social media works.
Yeah. And when you have a million things going on, just that's an easy thing to go, I don't have time for that, And so you get a total mixed bag. And I think a lot of corporate marketing people, it gives them, they start shaking and like, I can't let all these people do this. They're going to butcher the brand. They're going to put us in legal jeopardy. There's a lot of industries, healthcare, financial services, mortgages, where, you say the wrong thing and you could be held legally responsible. And so, that is a problem. It's a big problem. And you want to be able to have social media at the local level, but how do you make sure? And if you have all these people that are just doing their own thing, it just opens you up for a lot of, potential exposure. And then, that's not even counting like just people that just don't do it well. They don't understand how it works. They don't do the frequency. They don't respond. And so it's almost more of a negative than a positive, which is why a lot of people then resort back to number one, not doing anything at all, because they really don't know how to handle it. And if you let them do it, you're going to have some superstars that do a really good job. And then you're going to pull your hair out wondering, why isn't everybody doing this? And those are some of the reasons why, and so letting the local people handle it, it can work, but generally it's going to work in a very limited way for some people, and so it's not really a great option if you're a franchise or you have a dealer network or, multiple locations where, and if you do it well, generally you're getting somebody you're hiring somebody, right, that has that experience, that background, and that can be very expensive as well. Now if you have a local marketing person and that's their job, great, they can do it. But that's quite an investment that you're making, per each location. And some franchises and brands, they just don't have the resources to do that. And they want to rely on the corporate to be able to support their marketing, and that's part of their model. So number two, let the people handle it themselves, is kind of a mixed bag, and that's really all you can expect. You can hope to give some training, you can hope that more and more people can do it, but in doing this for over a decade with multi-location brands, I mean, it's just not realistic to expect consistency of results, consistency of effort and process really at the local level without tech. Go ahead.
Yeah. And the other thing is I think there's this misnomer that we've run into a lot over the years in all of the multi-location services that we provide. There are some people who think like on the local level that you're coming to take that away from them. The ones who truly do social media well, who are treating it like a lifestyle, not a task, those are the people that really excel at that. And what you want to say is no, we're just giving you additional tools, right? So and then you have the whole other segment, which is the majority of them who are like, oh my gosh, can somebody please help me with this? This is I have other things that I need to be doing. So this goes to that hybrid mode that Matt was talking about. Is an option is actually extending help to your local market and all of your locations, and saying you can still have the freedom to spread your wings and excel at this, but let us help you. Let us carry part of the load and make it easier.
Yeah. Well, Kevin's jumping ahead.
And a lot of people just
Kevin's jumping ahead a little bit here because.
I don't know.
That's kind of the fourth option, and we'll get to that. But I just wanted to say, the third thing that I wanted to mention before we get into that, because I do like the hybrid approach, and we'll talk about how you can execute that. But I think, the third way that people I think the third most common is just to try to manage it nationally. Okay, yeah, we got to do something local, but we're just going to manage it nationally, and that's obviously better than doing nothing. And you take away a lot of the risks and things that were in, letting the people do it at the local level. But when most people, when they do this, they miss out on that true localization. So a lot of the efforts we see in this regard are hey, I'm going to use something like a Hootsuite or whatever, and I can put in there 50 of my local accounts or 100 of my local accounts, and I can just post the same thing out to the local level. And while it's getting on a local account, it is, it's pretty repetitive. It's very difficult in that way to localize without a ton of effort and work, because you literally have to have, all these different posts that you're creating. So, you take what you would do at a national level times it, if you had 50 local markets, times it by 50, and, maybe there's a little bit of economies of scale there, obviously, in some of the graphic production and some of the content ideas and things, but then you're constantly working, to localize. And so this is where, and I think you miss out on, no one can be an expert, in each market. And I think from the national perspective, there are some good tech tools out there. I mean, what we focus on as a company is how do we do that with localization in mind. So we build data profiles for individual local markets. We can do variable substitution so that we're mentioning the city names, and, we can have different photography and things swapped out, or we can post things to people that only sell a certain service, right? So if you're an HVAC and we have a client that maybe half their locations do plumbing and half don't. So if we do plumbing content, we can select a group and we can publish it only going out to the local. So that's kind of a good, I think, approach where you can, provided, I think the caveat there is localization tools are really important. Otherwise, you're going to have a ton of work into it, or you're going to have this really vanilla kind of repetitive message at every level that's pretty easily sniffed out by customers, I think. Kevin, do you want to kind of build on that? I know you have a lot of experience with it.
Yeah, just from a day-to-day management standpoint, the drudgery, and that's kind of what I was getting to with that help part, is that, oh my gosh, I've got to copy and paste this. I've got to, oh wait, these 50 phone numbers have to change so that it's the correct phone number in the post. Or we have a shortened URL, a bit.ly, if you will, and I have to create that 50 different times, and I have to make sure it's the right URL that goes with the right post. And the drudgery of doing that on a day-to-day basis with otherwise fantastic tools. I use Agorapulse all the time. Used Hootsuite over the years. We're not saying that those are bad tools. They're just not designed to do the personalization and the localization and the variation to assist the person that's managing that every dadgum day. And then forget about the posting part of it. What about the response mechanism? Well, how am I going to what am I going to do? Go in and log into each individual thing to see if anything has come in? Or is that going to come to me in a nice report that says, these are the things that require actions? And how do I respond appropriately and know how do I forward something to somebody that needs to be addressed at a higher level for compliancy levels or reasons and so forth. So yeah, there's a whole lot of things that seem very simplistic at first, but again, just the drudgery and the monotony of doing that on a day-to-day basis, when you have more than N amount of locations, there's better ways to do it.
Yeah, for sure. And that kind of leads me to, and a little bit later, we're going to talk about some of the tools and things that can help in this regard. I think this is a decent strategy. It can work really well. It kind of maybe get you like 75, 80% of the way there, and you can have a pretty good delivery if you have tools that can localize the stuff. I mean, that's really going to be key, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But that gives you the ability to make it feel local and do it at the local level, even though you're managing it all nationally, which is far better than just doing posting out there that's all the same, or the work to do it and to localize it. So the tech can get you a lot of way there. Now, I think the fourth option, which I think Kevin would probably agree is the best if you can make it work, is kind of a hybrid approach, right? So where you have the tech tools in place, you're delivering stuff at a corporate level with great strategy, you're doing most of the work. But then you have tools, as Kevin said, where you can monitor all the different responses. You can filter those out by keywords and types of posts that people are making. And then you have somebody at the local level that is responsible, that can respond, right, for things that need that. Or they can also contribute, at a level where they know the market, they know they have the pulse of the culture locally and the community there you're engaging with, whatever market you're in, and they can give a little bit more dialed in content that have the pulse of the community, on occasion. And that's what I would say. And there is, the tech that we use can allow you to have people at the local level with a degree of control, where they could have to get a post approved, can do a double approval process. And you can do things like that allow you to have that local expert, but you still have that national program. And what I always say, and we say in all of our programs, it has to work if they do nothing, right, at the local level. So it's kind of similar to the complete national control if you have the right tools and you're localizing everything, but then you're adding in that component of boots on the ground, someone in local market that understands, that can contribute, and that can do that. And I think, that goes a long way to really, making it authentic, quick responses that are well thought out, and you're connecting people that get to that level of true interest, or problems or issues or whatever that need to be solved by somebody, and you're connecting them to someone in the local market who can run with it. I think is, the holy grail scenario where you're going to experience the best results. I mean, you want to add to that, Kev?
Yeah, I mean, let's go back to Bob, right? So Bob is a smart local person, and he knows that their local team won, the big prize, the sports thingy. And so he decides that he's going to say congratulations or whatever. The national is probably never going to do that. I mean, we have ways of doing that, but there's probably not, okay? Bob is going to do that because he's part of his community and he has that connection, right? Bob could also say, hey, this product is really hot. My phone is ringing constantly, asking me if I have this hot thing in stock. Or I can post on the social media, hey, we're expecting these to be back in stock on whatever. Stay tuned here and we'll let you know when we have them back, which reduces the phone volume, right? And also provides a better service to that locality. And Bob can do that on a local level. And if this person that's sitting at corporate is nervous about that, as Matt said, which sometimes they are, what's the language? How did they do that? Bob's a horrible speller. Whatever the case is, right? You can have that review and approve process so that Bob's able to contribute and he feels like he's contributing. But then Sally's able to say, yeah, Bob, it's there, not there. You caveman, and so this is what it's supposed to be. But there's all of that is just a mechanism of having the right people. Now, the other thing that Matt said, which is gold, is it has to work if you don't have Bob. So when you set it up this way, what you're conceding is that I still have to get I still want the business, so I still have to get this much of it done. Now, if I have 5 people that I can bring on board that will actually be Bobs, great. Then they can do that. If the rest don't, I still have to figure out how I can get this done, because the company needs the overall lift.
Yeah, and I think you can. The cool thing is, and a lot of people might start out, okay, we're just going to manage it nationally, and then you kind of start to get a feel for it, and then you can start rolling in local people. But you can have more of a, paint by numbers approach. Like if you just gave me a blank sheet of paper and said, create me a cool picture of a stream and a cobblestone bridge and some nice fields and a forest, like you're not going to get something very good from me. So, I could try to do that. But hey, if I had like a template with a paint by numbers and squares and paint this color here and stay in the lines, I could produce something really nice. So, that's kind of the idea. At the corporate level, what we want to do is we want to have a great foundation. We want to have a paint by numbers, some tech that makes it easy. And it's so much less intimidating for them at the local level. So, I would say the majority of your markets, you're going to have somebody that understands the market, that understands the product, the service, what they're hearing, what consumers are interested in, and they can contribute. But if you take away all of that massive hurdle of what do I do? And like, how do I start? And how do I use the tech? Then you have really specific things that say, hey, we're going to provide the foundation. We're going to be pumping in content. We're going to localize it. We're going to be doing all those things. And what we're going to do is, as we're getting responses back in, if there are things where people are wanting to buy or they have a specific question, we're going to reroute that to you. And you'll get a notification, and then you can go in and you give them really specific training on that. And then, the next step would be, hey, here are kind of some of the content ideas that we want you to be able to do at the local level. Look for these opportunities. Like, if you're doing local installations and you have photos of those, or there are events or things you're sponsoring, you can have a list of a lot of really easy things to get done. And then they can just, do it when those things kind of come up. And now you're getting more user generated content and things like that. But imagine, like, if you're the local person who has no experience in this, that is infinitely easier and more doable and attainable for you than just saying, hey, go to social media, right? I mean, that can be so intimidating.
And here's our guidebook and our policies on it. And here's read through this. And I think the other thing is, I don't think it should be underestimated that, for example, we have Thanksgiving coming up. So if National wanted to post across all of the locations Happy Thanksgiving and have something that their creative team came up with and whatever, that's great. Then that can go out. What that means is that the individual locations don't have to worry about posting that day, right? And that means that they can spend time on other content for different days. So what you're doing is again, it's back to that principle of sharing the load, right? And just so that people know is you can also have categories built in where you have certain groups that say, we don't want the automatic holiday content, right? We're going to create our own holiday content. And then National could say, well, you know what? We trust those 5 that have requested that they're going to do it because they've been doing it so well. So through this whole thing, what we're talking about is it really boils down simply to how do you get the value, what's best for that organization's footprint and the resources, the available resources that they have to bring to bear for it, and then how do you make it attainable? How do you make it so that they can do this or do it easier? This is, and it really does come down to that. If every single location in your market had a Bob, we wouldn't be talking about this because Bob would already be killing it for you. The Bobs would have it, right? That's not the reality of how it works.
Yeah. So I think we've covered a lot of stuff. I mean, obviously, and what I'm hoping that you take away from this is just that, there is a lot of opportunity there. Obviously, it varies by industry, what channels and platforms, and we didn't really even get into the advertising side of it and boosting posts and things like that, which we'll save for another future episode, getting down in the weeds. But what I really want you to take away is there is opportunity there. And despite the hurdles and things, we've talked about some strategies that can make it work. But really, if you're a multi-location brand and you want it to work for you, you have to have some tech to be able to do that, right? It's too cumbersome. It's too much to manage to do it without that. I mean, you can, but you're going to have an army of people, coordination nightmares and things like that. So what I would say is there are some really great tools out there. We use a lot of technology to help empower our clients to do this, where, for example, we can localize posts. We can send them to different groups. We can allow local people to contribute in a controlled way, where you can have different workflows and approval processes at the local level. You can integrate them with local websites and landing pages and promotional things. That's all, part of a strategy, but there is tech out there to let you do it and to do it well. So I would just encourage you to think about that. Think about what you're doing currently. What are you doing at the local level? How's that working? And take a step back and say, how could we take kind of what we're doing nationally and a lot of the content and things that we're developing, and how can we provide that at the local level to really connect with people in our local community and do it in a way that makes it easy and less intimidating for people at the local level? And what can we do at a national level to support them? And just look for you can do your own research. I mean, certainly, we're open to having conversation with anybody that's looking into this and needs to be pointed in the right direction, or to see some of the tech that we use and that our clients use to enable this. But it's well worth, the effort and the thought, because if you do it well, a lot of people just aren't doing it well. And the thing is, if you're a multi-location brand and you're not thinking about this, think about the local businesses that you're competing against in each of your local markets. They're the ones like Elliot's massage therapist that, they're doing it because they're so motivated to make their business work, to be successful. They know it's important. And you get those good entrepreneurs that are just doing it, that's who you're competing against, at the local level. So your local people, they need to be having the same level of game. And the good news is, as a national brand, you have a lot of centralized assets and resources that a lot of local businesses don't have that you can provide. So the combination of what you do centrally, and if you can use a hybrid approach where you're getting some local contribution, you should be able to compete against anybody if you do it well. So I think that's, the main point that we wanted to make, give you some ideas on how others are doing it, what the upside is, and how you can start thinking about implementing a program and taking advantage of social media, across your multi-location brand.
And it just occurred to me, Matt, that the one thing that we didn't talk about, and we'll have to say for another time as well, is we did not really delve into how wonderful it is to see at scale and the measurement, the reality of what benefit it brings. We completely went past that, which means that now you have marketing data coming in at scale as well that can guide the ship.
Yep, absolutely. And be able to get that and see in every market and how posts are working and the engagement level. It's fascinating stuff really to see. You do a post and how to do in the Pacific Northwest versus, the Southwest versus the Northeast. I mean, those things are awesome to be able to see if there is differences and just, what content people are responding to. That's another great advantage that you have as a multi-location brand, right? So you can see things that are working across the board, and you can do more of that and less of things that aren't. So you do get a lot more data. Now, obviously, you still need to look at data on a market by market basis, which is important, but also you can see things across all your markets, and that's really powerful. So thanks for bringing that up.
Awesome, guys. I did have one more thing I was thinking of while you guys were speaking, which is really the motivation for why, like, if you're a manufacturer, what is your motivation? If you're a franchise, what is your motivation for doing social media really well? And, I was thinking about it, and for a franchise, you want to make sure that you're providing something that works really well for your franchisees. That you guys kind of mentioned, it's buttoned up. It's like, we have a process for every other part of your business. That's why you bought into our franchise. Here's a process for social media as well. And then with, and sometimes revenue in franchise models are different, but sometimes revenue is associated with, how well, obviously you want to grow your business and you want to, have good numbers to show people so you can enroll more franchisees, which social media and having something there can help with that. But also with manufacturers, it's your revenue is tied to your social media across your different dealer network or whatever you have. And so it's advantageous for you to have something there where you're visible, and you can, measure the attribution and do something that way. So just kind of like some thoughts I had on why you might be motivated. Anyway, anything else to add, guys, before we?
Well, I think that's a good point. Motivation wise, you want to build brand affinity, right? You want, and depending on the business that you're in, some businesses get a lot of transactional opportunities through social media. One example I can think of, I remember I was in getting my haircut, and like all the there were several gals in the salon, and they were all talking. It was like close to lunch, and there was this like healthy smoothie place down the street, and they're all looking at their Instagram. Hey, this is a new drink they have, or there's a promotion, a coupon, buy one, get one 50% off. And so like they were all like connected to this brand through Instagram. Right. And that's how they were getting updates and notification, and it was keeping them top of mind. And as people were getting close to lunch, they were like, seeing that, we talked about boats. If you're a boat manufacturer, like, or you're into modified trucks or whatever, like seeing what the community is doing, what people are doing with, their vehicles or their boat, like, seeing those lifestyle images, what people are doing on different lakes, and you're educating, like for bigger type purchases, higher consideration products, you're engaging in, and that's typically a longer sales cycle. You might be thinking about buying a boat, but you might not be going to do it for 6 months or a year. So now you're starting to do your research, and those brands that do a good job of showing people having fun, showing different options for different lifestyles. Like, are you wanting to use your boat to do, extreme sports and wake surfing and, wakeboarding and tubing, or do you want something that's more of a cruiser where, so the better you do that and you have good content, people that are in the market for those things, they want to consume that because, as any of us, are thinking about a purchase, or we're going to remodel our house. I know my wife is constantly, looking at all those things and coming up with ideas. So, again, there's a lot of different purposes and motivation, but clearly at the end of the day, it's how do you grow your business? How do you become more successful, both in the short and the long term? And there's different goals. It's brand recognition, it's brand affinity, it's repeat customers, it's reaching new people that don't know about you. It's answering questions. Social media has just become another way, a very prevalent way that we communicate in society. And if you're not there and you're not listening, it's just like Kevin said, you're not answering certain phone lines, and you're making, a concerted effort to kind of shut that down. But if you foster it and you do it well, irregardless of what your motivations are, as a company, that needs to factor into the strategy. But having a strategy is going to be far better than just doing nothing.
Right on. Well, awesome. Well, thanks for being with us, Kevin. Appreciate you being on the podcast with us today. It was fun to have you on.
I appreciate being included, and I just would follow up to say every business wants to at least be considered, and you need to look at any and all ways that you have available to your business to be considered. You want to be in the lineup. You want to be considered, right? And so how do you get each of your locations considered?
I love that. Good final word. Well, everyone, thanks for joining us this week for the Multi-Location Marketing Show, and we will see you next week.